Our next guest is Mayor Michael Hancock of Denver, Colorado. Denver's a huge place, much bigger. We're going to get into that in a moment. But he chairs the Communication and Transportation Committee for the Conference of Mayors, and he's going to be sharing his thoughts on innovation in infrastructure during the conference. Mayor Hancock, it's great to see you again. It's great to see you live and in person. Look, one of the big issues that's come up politically, maybe metaphysically, is 5G and airplanes, right?
Yeah.
I'm in and out of the Denver airport all the time. Also, you got 5G coming online, and all of a sudden we have this issue come out of nowhere. I just want to ask you, for our readers, can you explain it to me, and can you give instructions to Secretary Buttigieg on what he ought to be doing?
Well, actually, I stand in support of Secretary Buttigieg and the airlines, quite frankly. I don't think there's anything that should trump, quite frankly, the safety of the people who are landing in the air, our pilots and the crews and the passengers. So if there is some concern, we haven't crossed every T, dotted every I, my recommendation is don't go live until we have settled that
No, I
question.
get that. I guess, because you deal with communications as well as transportation. The whole thing in my mind is like, so we've been talking about 5G and how important it is, and
extremely
being
important.
Competitive, and what South Korea can do or Europe can do that we can't do. And so all this stuff coming on 5G, and you would have thought somebody had crossed those T's and dotted those I's before.
Absolutely.
So are the mayors screaming? Because you all have big airports.
Well, I'm awfully concerned about it. Now, you got to understand, I'm very much in the aviation. I sat on President Obama's Aviation Management Committee, FAA Management Committee. And so this is an area that is particularly focus and interest of mine. When that pilot begins to descend and to land, he or she turns it over to the tower. And he depends on them a great deal. And that information must not be interrupted by any means. And so you would think they would cross every T and dot every I. But sometimes, we're so excited, we're moving forward, and someone may have missed that, or they at least said, hey, listen, we got in Europe, as I've heard some of the 5G carriers saying, we got in Europe, there's been no interruption. Let's just make sure we're clear before we go live.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, look, we've been talking to mayors from small cities, big city mega regions like Denver, and I know that in the greater Denver metropolitan region, there are lots of mayors in that area, but you're the biggie. You're the feudal lord in the middle of all that. But I'm interested, in one point, Denver, Colorado was the frontier city of the United States. And I think as we sit on the verge of thinking about infrastructure dollars coming in, looking at correcting a lot of problems in our cities, that we had divides and in opportunity in different cities. How do you create the 22nd century frontier city that's less about geography and more about the assets and uniting people? I know it's a big metaphysical question, but I know you kind of think that way.
It is, and here's reality. We may not be creating that big mega city. We may be creating the big mega region. Because what we do now globally, because of our advances in technology and travel and interest of people, the reality is that we don't compete as cities anymore. We compete as regions. People are interested in the metro region of Denver. And that's why we have one of the great models in the metro Denver area of cooperation and collaboration between mayors as part of the Metro Mayors Caucus. 43 mayors coming together,
43.
Making decisions, for the region, deciding to do regional.
I thought it was 6 or 7.
Yeah,
you got 43?
No, 43, working together, making decisions with regards to transportation planning, transportation implementation, taxation, tourism promotion. Those are things that are going to, quite frankly, propel a region forward. And that's why we think in Denver metro area that we do this together as regions and not as cities.
So when you look at the future of, say, public transportation, which has been one of the themes we've been getting at today, now I'm familiar with the highway system that goes through and how it's been expanding and what both the opportunities and limits are that are. But what about private vehicle transportation?
Transit.
When you deal with the transit side, what's the future of that look like in your region?
Well, let's take it under the guise of the current infrastructure plan that's coming to all of our cities. And as I'm thinking about, for example, Colfax Avenue, you say you're familiar with it, the longest road in America is Colfax Avenue. It goes across multiple cities across the state of Colorado. And with those infrastructure dollars and thinking about the future, I wouldn't plan just for the Colfax Avenue segment that's in Denver, Colorado. I would think about the cities that surround me as well, and how we can continue whatever improvements we need to make, maybe capitalize on, the benefits of working together, going to the market together, making sure we have continuous construction teams working together to improve it, to do, multimodalism, whether it's bike lanes and transit, bus rapid transit, whatever we're going to do on that road. We must think and know that people are looking at multimodal ways in which to travel and traverse our cities. And so together we can build that road and improve it for the 21st century.
Let me ask you another question. It may be unfair because I don't think it's completely under your terrain, but I interviewed the mayor of Boulder a few years ago, and Boulder at that time was registered somewhere as the happiest place in America, happiest city in America. And they thought, well, it's because people have purpose and they get to ride bikes and all that. Who knows what it is. But the other side of Boulder was, I remember, a big mudslide. Another side of it were the fires we just had, the Marshall Fire.
County,
our condolences for the huge impact that had both in people's lives but also their homes and whatnot. And so you're a place where I would say it's bigger than climate change, but just violent weather and circumstances of just, reality about the environment right now is coming down. How do you think about that? How does that become part of the transportation and communications picture of your city?
It doesn't become a part, it is a part of it. The reality is that if we want to impact climate change, we must deal with single-occupied vehicles. Today, 73% of Denverites and the surrounding communities that come into Denver travel in single-occupied vehicles. That's unsustainable. It also is a recipe for disaster, climate change-wise, for our children and our children's children. So the reality is we've got to fix that. We cannot allow that to happen. We've got to drop that to at least 55% and keep going and doing everything we can to convince folks to let go of their steering wheels, consider transit, and we've got to be willing to invest and build the transit necessary to move people affordably, conveniently around the metro region. And we also got to be willing to do things like bike lanes. People got to recognize you're going to start sharing the road with pedestrians and people on bikes and scooters, and so you got to provide for folks opportunities and options and alternatives to just jumping in a vehicle. And that's the only way we're going to do it. And so I think it's critically important. If we're going to impact climate change, we must drop that SOV or that single-occupied vehicle. No.
What is the Denver story with infrastructure investments and decision in the past, or bank financing, or others that Anthony Fox, I'm sure you know Anthony Fox, another alum of Mayor's. And look, I'm going to get in trouble because I can't remember right now if Anthony's working for Uber or Lyft. It's kind of like Pepsi and Coke. Sorry, Anthony. Sorry about the no, he's working for one really. But he really taught me a lot about how the legacy of infrastructure in this nation was racist and loaded and biased, and we have to dismantle that and rewire and recreate, and we're going to get that opportunity again. I really admire him. So I guess the question is, when you kind of look at equity, which has been something we bandy around a lot here in Washington, but when you have to kind of get rubber meets the road, doing things in a real way, how do you look at equity and reinventing and rewiring the transportation and communications picture for your people?
Anthony and I come from the same swath. He was what I call my dinner mate at these conferences. He and I would go grab dinner and glass of wine and talk about these issues.
And for our audience, he was former mayor of Charlotte, and he was a former Secretary of Transportation.
Secretary of Transportation, and a dear friend even to this day. And he talked about ladders of opportunity. And as we build our mobility strategies in our cities, we must think about ladders of opportunity. What I say, Steve, is you want to know where poverty exists, if you want to know where poverty exists, show me where the least amount of mobility options exist, and I'll show you poverty, because you're locking people into an area system that does not allow them to move, to expand, or create opportunities for themselves, whether it's jobs, schools, grocery stores, healthy activities and environments, parks, and what have you. The reality is that when we get a chance to bring affordable, convenient, practical transportation options, particularly transit, into neighborhoods, particularly underserved, parentally overlooked neighborhoods, and we have affordable housing there as well, now we've got a recipe of ladders of opportunity that begin to move people up that ladder and to begin to obliterate poverty, and at least those elements of poverty. So Anthony's absolutely correct. It was discriminatory. It did segregate people. But now we get a chance to pull them out through these infrastructure, transportation planning opportunities, and equity has to be our guiding star.
What do you think the Biden team needs to hear from major cities today to do better with them?
With regards to transportation or anything?
Anything.
Well, I think they're doing.
I say this humbly that it's a hard job being president. We've just come through, and we kind of look at everything we've had, the pandemic, divisions in this town, the murder of George Floyd, others, Ahmaud Arbery. You have real stress in American society, January 6th. It's a tough load.
Sure.
But on the other hand, when you kind of look at the question of toxicity, and I think the thing that I'm always intrigued with when I talk to mayors or governors is that they have a responsibility to kind of sew their communities together. I think we spend a lot of time, perhaps, unfortunately, seeing things, the benefit of driving things apart. So if mayors were to run the country, how would you do it differently? What advice would you have for the Biden team in terms of pulling the country together?
Well, it's not just Biden, it's the Congress.
Well,
and we've seen that, right? So the thing that we say about mayors, we cannot and we don't try to get away from our constituency. The beauty of Washington is that you bring everyone together to make good laws, hopefully good laws and good decisions for the people. The bad thing about Washington or Congress is that you bring everybody away from their constituency. Mayors go to the grocery stores, we see our constituencies. We go to the movie theater, we see our constituencies. We go to the park, our constituency is there. And so we're constantly in that conversation, and we're constantly in the will of the issues that people care most about. I often say, the issues that are my priorities are the same issues that are on your mind, Steve. When you walk on your front porch and on the early Saturday morning, in the dew of that morning in Denver, Colorado, what are you thinking about? My roads are in good repair. My neighborhood is safe. My parks are welcoming and accessible to me. I can walk to them. My children are healthy and they're in this neighborhood healthy. The schools down the street are performing. Those are the things that we must work on. So my advice to Biden and members of Congress, get back to the people. Stop playing the partisan politics. Get back to the people, and there you will find the issues that Americans care about and hopefully improve your governance of this nation.
We have a question from the audience for you, but before I do that, I'm going to go a little bit longer because I want to ask you, because you've thrown yourself at homelessness, which is something we haven't talked about in today's forum perhaps enough. But you take it very seriously and you're doing things. So I look at the mayor's conference that you're attending as sort of a great opportunity for show and tell. So if you're at show and tell on stage and talking about a way that you're whacking at homelessness in Denver that others might replicate, what are the features of that?
Well, we must recognize it's not just about money. And the reality is that there are a lot of mitigating circumstances that are complicating the challenge around homelessness. It's already a very complex issue. It's the most complex issue I've ever dealt with. I've got 5,000 plus homeless people experiencing homelessness in my city. For every person on my street or who are homeless, experiencing homelessness in my city, I must tailor my approach to them. And so it takes an infrastructure, it takes resources, but more importantly, it takes a willingness to lean in and say, we are going to do everything we can to help every person who's experiencing homelessness in our city. No excuses, lean in and recognize it might be substance abuse. It might be mental health. It might be just familial disassociation, but lean in and try to build an infrastructure that helps to serve the people and meet them where they are.
It's a huge problem in the country.
Huge problem, but you also got to have some guardrails, right? You for in Denver, for example, we don't allow for encampments in the city of Denver. We rather have you indoors. We know if we get you indoors, we know we're connecting you with services, you're more likely to be stabilized. We do a housing first approach, but we also recognize we got to have some good mental health and substance misuse strategies as well.
Yeah, just noting, in the tweets from the city, you just placed 576 individuals in housing. Yeah, just pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, look, it may not even be the tip of the iceberg. I don't know, but I read a lot of stories going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we've got a question for you from Kevin. Kevin.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Zedek with the American Flood Coalition. My question to you all is, where do you rank resilience to extreme weather events in your list of investment decisions when planning your capital budgets and local projects? And how do you view the role of the federal government, states, individual cities, and regional resilience partnerships in preparing for natural hazards?
Appreciate that, Kevin. Great question. First and foremost, we revamped our emergency response strategies in Denver because right just before the pandemic, actually, in the event of natural disasters, biological disasters like we're experiencing now, how do we respond as a city? We take our entire leadership team in the city of Denver through simulations and making sure that we're responding. It's like being in a movie theater, a movie set. We are actually acting out a simulation so we can build a resiliency, but we must also make the investments in that capital infrastructure to fortify our resiliency. The partnerships with the state, federal government, critical. It is very important. Unfortunately, the federal and state are by nature, and many times municipalities as well, are reactive. to the situation. But the best we can do in the local level is try to prepare, try to simulate situations and how we might respond so we can be prepared. And thankfully we were as a result of COVID and those simulations. But we also need our federal and state partners so that we can respond appropriately.
Finally, Michael, you and I have been talking a lot over the years. You've been mayor there for a long time. I think you're in your third term, if I have it right. You know, any interest in applying for a job in town here?
No, no. You know, Washington has its own flavor, and you know, one thing you will learn after being a mayor, you're used to getting things done. You're used to saying, let's fix that pothole and expecting that pothole to get fixed. I don't have time for partisan politics or bureaucracy. The people expect results.
Well, Michael Hancock, mayor of Denver, Colorado, thank you as always for joining us here. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck at the Conference of Mayors, which I find to be one of the most fascinating meetings that happens in this town. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much.